I'm Elamin Abdelmahmoud, and this is Commotion.
The dead have got something to say, and I'm saying it.
The Bride of Frankenstein.
No, just the bride.
That is a bit of the trailer from The Bride, exclamation point, written and directed by Maggie Gyllenhaal. It is an American Gothic romance. You have Christian Bale as Frankenstein's monster, and then Jessie Buckley plays the bride. Look, there have been a lot of portrayals of Frankenstein's monster in cinema, but his bride has not really gotten the same treatment. That is until Maggie Gyllenhaal comes along and says, you know what, we gotta fix this. We gotta tell the story. And then she got a huge budget to do so, and is not doing so well at the box office. That is only a part of the story. We're going to talk about all of it. Hanna Flint is here. Kayleigh Donaldson is here. Hello, both of you. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too.
Oh
Good to see you again.
I'm excited. Kayleigh, I'm going to start with you. Before we get into the actual movie, I just want to get into a bit of the history here. So, The Bride of Frankenstein is one of the most sort of, I think, recognizable images of horror. Like, we're very familiar with that image. And yet, there have not been that many portrayals of her. Talk to me about the origins of this character. Where did she come from?
Yeah, so the bride isn't really a character in the Mary Shelley book. The creature asks for a companion and Frankenstein goes to make one, but becomes so disgusted by the idea of them reproducing that he aborts the project. The idea of the Bride of Frankenstein comes along with the movie of the same name directed by James Whale. And even then, she's not in that film that much, maybe 10 minutes at the very most. But she really is the most defining female character of that era of Hollywood horror, and the aesthetic, that incredible hair becomes such a defining part of what we think of as classic Hollywood horror. But as we got countless Frankenstein adaptations over the decades, the idea of the bride as their sort of own character or own narrative is really not tackled that often in adaptations. It's actually very surprising how few versions we have of her in film and TV.
She kind of exists mostly as a sort of a reference, that she does a fully sort of developed character. But then Hanna, Maggie Gyllenhaal comes along and she says, you know what, this film is a sort of in response to that lack of portrayal. Like, that is like sort of the origin point of why she wants to do this. And it's her way of giving this historically underexplored character a voice, just focusing on the actual character who's played in this movie by Jessie Buckley. How do we feel about her? When you watch this movie, what do you get?
Well, I think Jessie Buckley is maybe the unique selling point of the film. I think she's fantastic. Obviously, she's worked with Maggie Gyllenhaal and The Lost Daughter, so they've got a very good relationship, actor-director relationship. I mean, here she's kind of passing two minds. She's playing, it's similar to Bride of Frankenstein, where Elsa Lanchester played both Mary Shelley in The Framing Device and also the bride later on. Here she plays both roles. It's interesting, you could get into like the Jungian archetypes of the shadow self, because we have her Mary Shelley in black and white in this weird purgatorial world. And she's almost like this rage-filled specter who's just finding a crack in the kind of veil of the life and death to try and needle her way in. And then we have Ida, who is a kind of gangster's mole. She's got a history with the mobsters, and then she's kind of unceremoniously killed. And so she can come back to life. And so she oscillates between that kind of fractured mind, that fractured identity really well. We have her doing the Mary Shelley, very clipped English vernacular. And then we have Ida's more like Chicagoan drawl. So it's quite an interesting and a kind of chaotic performance. Sometimes it's kind of garbled. There's so much dialogue, so it's hard to keep up. Yeah. But I would say that, she is kind of it makes this film watchable, at least because of that performance.
Let me ask you the same question, because it's nice that Jessie Buckley is literally everywhere, because she's basically winning every single award on her way to the Oscars, and then you also get to see her in this movie. But how do you feel about her performance and the character that comes through in this movie?
It's a completely go for broke performance in a very go for broke movie that is, I found to be very messy, but I was also deeply in love with it. If this only came out when I was 15, I would have written so much fan fiction about it. But Buckley is doing it's very large and theatrical in a movie that is aiming for so many weird tonal swings. The way that she swings from this very sort of gangster's mall accent to sounding like a Cockney barmaid from the musical Oliver at the drop of a hat is so entertaining to watch, and contrasted with Christian Bale, who is the monster, Frank as they call him, who's sort of doing a Tom Waits impression with his voice. It's a lot of ideas going on at once, and I completely understand why a lot of critics hated it, but I was just so taken by how go for broke it was on every aspect. It's
Yeah.
so messy, but in a way that I relished.
I will say, like, those are the movies I react to the most. Like, the idea of like a movie being messy and the idea of a movie being a go for broke sort of performance. I like watching a risk on screen, even if that risk doesn't necessarily pay off. Hannah, let me ask you, the performance is just one piece of this whole thing, but the idea is meant to be that Maggie's saying, here is a feminist reimagining of the story. Did that land for you in any way as you watch this?
But I think even calling it a feminist reimagining really does a disservice to the fact that Frankenstein's, written by Mary Shelley, was feminist. She was using the character of Frankenstein and the creature to talk about her feelings, her relationship with her father. We also have the other two characters, female characters in there. And we kind of, you mentioned how the Bride of Frankenstein that Victor creates, part of that, they were worried that she would be too unmanageable. Like if the creature was hard to control, what about this female bride? She'd be a nightmare. And so, so in many ways, I think I understand what she's doing. But for me, so much about the feminism in this feels like something from 2016. I don't know if like we've trodden already on this kind of land of feminism. There's kind of a lot of feminist buzzwords in there. There's a lot of girl power imagery. There's kind of a plot line where like she suddenly becomes the like figurehead for female liberation in very, I don't know, cartoonish sort of women fighting against patriarchy, thrusting against a car bonnet, which kind of reminded me, like last time I saw that was Cameron Diaz in The Counselor. So I feel like two films have really like kind of like triggered that in my mind. But I think the problem is that it promises this like kind of radical idea about feminism, right? In the clip that you just played, she says, Christian Bale goes, Bride of Frankenstein. She says, just the bride. And there's something really powerful about like autonomy and women choosing themselves and not conforming to kind of like heteronormative ideas about relationship and companionships. But by the end, it totally just reneges on that promise. So for me, it is never as radical as it tries to make out. Feminism is quite retrograde. It doesn't really move anything further. And then there's so much noise going on. It's a film noir detective story. It's a musical. It's Bonnie and Clyde, Natural Born Killers. So much superficial stuff. And so for me, for a film that's all about giving like the Bride of Frankenstein a voice, I'm like, Maggie Gyllenhaal, say less.
Maggie Gyllenhaal, maybe figure out the specific thing that you want to say, because it does sound like there's a lot of ideas that are going on here. But I will say that like one of the big conversation pieces about this movie, let me ask you about this, Kayleigh, is that like there's been a lot of conversations about like how the initial screenings of this film had like this level of violence that was really, really high. For a lot of people, it was too much. Then in an interview with this New York Times, Maggie Gyllenhaal asked if a man had made this movie, would they be getting the same kind of criticism for making this movie too violent? What do you think of that sort of response to that?
I mean, there are a couple gnarly moments where I did wince a little bit. I think that when we were talking about mainstream Hollywood, sort of violence and sexual content, there's actually a very low bar as to what is considered shocking, especially in a film that has a budget like this that's being released by Warner Brothers. So ultimately, it's not all that shocking. And I think a director has to talk up a little bit of that to promote her film and say, oh, there's things we had to cut because the test screenings were too shocking. Really, that's not really what the film is about for me, or what works about it for me. I like that it is frenetic and has too many ideas going on. I like that it has that quality of someone who is trying to figure out all of these ridiculous ideas going on in their brain, but not necessarily having the words for it. When she's possessed by Mary Shelley, she suddenly has this incredible vocabulary, but has no idea how to really use it, which is an interesting idea. It doesn't, again, there's so much that works, and then she doesn't really take it that far. But I like too many ideas over too little. But I'm just sort of amazed that she got the money to do any of this stuff. I mean, if you talk about it being like Bonnie and Clyde and all these things, this movie is basically the Joker sequel that Todd Phillips didn't make. It's so much like Joker Folie à Deux that I was actually stunned. I wondered if she'd been on set recording qualities of it. It really does feel like she read that script and goes, "Here's how I would do that."
I mean, she also $90 million budget. It's not a small budget movie at all. Hannah, let me ask you the same question, because
I would say that's maybe the most feminine. Maybe that's the most feminist thing we can take about it. That a woman can get $80-90 million and make a mediocre film just like a man can. So that's a win. I
And
guess.
we don't
and I
have
hope
to
she
read
gets to do it
16
again.
think pieces. We don't have to read 16 think pieces about how women can't make a film anymore because one of them flopped. So, we are making
Yeah.
progress on that front.
Well, let me,
Yeah.
Hannah, let me ask you the question about the violence and your reaction to the violence, because I'm thinking of like the long history of undead women in movies who, when they come back, there's a lot of rage that is sort of in front of them, and the level of violence is high. I'm thinking of Jennifer's Body, for example, and like also like the idea of like taking these trope characters, whether it's the cheerleader or the bride, and sort of using that as like a place to build from. There's gonna sometimes be violence involved, and I feel like the idea of even just reacting to the idea there's too much violence in this feels a little sketchy to me. But did it ever feel too violent for you? Did it kind of cross the line to a different place?
No, I don't mind violence at all. But I think Maggie has said in an interview that people that had issues complained about the sexual violence and maybe suggested that male directors don't get as much, flack about it. I disagree. I think in my book, I do a whole chapter on rape culture. And I say, actually, when it comes to sexual violence, it would behoove a lot of filmmakers maybe to not use rape as a plot device. And I think my issue in this film is the way that sexual violence is used. She has a moment where the bride is being attacked. And what annoyed me a little about it is that, okay, if you're going to use that to move the plot forward, make it about the bride's plot moving forward. That moment is not about her. It's about Frank, Christine Bale's character's reaction to it, which sets this kind of thing into motion, which goes into the Bonnie and Clyde thing. So for me, it's like, real life, yes, sexual violence exists. You can't sugarcoat it. But what is the purpose in the story? Is it moving the female character forward, or is it moving the male character forward? And I think she kind of failed in that regard.
I think that's a good place to leave it on The Bride. I really appreciate you guys being here to dissect this movie. I'm interested in a movie that is trying to do a lot of things, even if it's failing. I also really appreciate your perspectives. Thank you for your time. Really good to see you.
Thank you.
Yes, of course.
Thanks very much.
Of course, anytime. Hannah Flint is a film critic and co-host of the podcast Fade to Black. Kayleigh Donaldson is a pop culture writer and the creator of the Substack Gossip Reading Club. The Bride is in theaters right now, directed by Maggie Gyllenhaal. In the meantime, my name is Elamin Abdelmahmoud. This show is called Commotion. It's been nice hanging with you. We're going to be around tomorrow. If you're around at the same time, we'd love to see you then. Have a great day.